And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Here is end-time newsman Rick Wiles.
This is True News, 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. Retirement investment strategist Terry Sacka is standing by to join the program in a few minutes. The big story today is the continuing carnage rocking stock markets around the world. Shanghai, Tokyo, London, Frankfurt, Zurich, New York City. The story is the same. Shares plunged in value as fears of a global depression escalated and the price of oil continued to search for the bottom. London's FTSE officially entered a bear market, meaning it has fallen more than 20% from its market top in 2015. U.S. oil had its worst day since 2003. West Texas Intermediate oil prices settled at $26.55 a barrel. Brent futures ended the day at $27.87. Today's low prices are getting precariously closer to the psychologically important level of $25 per barrel. Some of America's biggest banks have warned in recent weeks that there will be substantial bankruptcies in U.S. energy companies if oil stays at $25 per barrel for a long time or dips lower. Despite the global glut of petroleum, oil-producing nations continue to increase their output. Storage space is becoming scarce to hold the excess oil. Ambrose Evans-Pritchard, international financial editor for London's Telegraph, wrote today from Davos, Switzerland, as he attends the World Economic Forum. He said, quote, "The International Monetary Fund is increasingly alarmed by signs that market liquidity is drying up and may trigger an even more violent global sell-off if investors rush for the exits at the same time." Zhu Min, the IMF's deputy director, said the stock market rout of the last 3 weeks is just a foretaste of what may happen as the U.S. Federal Reserve continues to raise interest rates this year, pushing up borrowing costs across the world. He warned that investors and wealth funds have clustered together in crowded positions. Asset markets have become dangerously correlated, amplifying the effects of any shift in mood. He's quoting Mr. Min from the IMF. The key issue is that liquidity could drop dramatically, and that scares everyone. Zhu told a panel at the World Economic Forum, quote, "If everybody is moving together, we don't have any liquidity at all. We have to be ready to act very fast," end of quote. Harvard professor Kenneth Rogoff said the fear in the market stems from the dawning realization that the Chinese are not magicians, and that this time the U.S. Fed may stand back and let the bloodletting run its course. Rogoff, speaking on Fox Business News, said what is driving this is that the central banks are not coming to the rescue. Professor Rogoff said these deep anxieties are causing companies to hold back investment, entrenching a slow growth malaise. The Fed may be forced to halt its tightening cycle and even cut rates again if the wild sell-off continues for much longer. Again, I'm reading from the Telegraph, this article written today by Ambrose Evans-Pritchard. Paul Singer, head of Elliott Management, said central banks around the world have corrupted global asset markets with $15 trillion of bond and equity purchases over the last 7 years, creating a total dependency on monetary policies that must inevitably be all the more painful when it ends. The bond markets, supposedly safe, have become the epicenter of risk. Mr. Singer said things could be very disorderly. There is the potential for a tectonic shift if investors lose confidence in central banks. End of quote. In an interview with the New York Review of Books, billionaire financier George Soros warned that the European Union is on the verge of collapse over the migrant crisis and is in danger of kicking the ball further up the hill in its management of the issue, which has seen more than 1 million refugees arrive in Europe in 2015. But Doc Burkhart, Bob Bierman, Edward Zoll are here in the studio. Gentlemen, glad to have you back here today.
Good to be back, Rick. Good to be here.
Glad to be here.
Yes, sir. And retirement investment strategist Terry Sacka is on the telephone. Terry is the chief strategist for Cornerstone Asset Metals. Terry, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Rick.
Well, Terry, it's been a wild day. Asia, last night I was up early in the morning, in the wee hours of the morning, and checked the markets. Realized they were going south very fast. Likewise, Europe started out the same way. New York City, the New York Stock Exchange, at one time the Dow Jones was down over 600 points. Now, as we are recording this program, just minutes before the closing bell, something miraculous has happened, Terry. What happened?
Yeah. Miraculous is about right. We've seen so much volatility. If it hasn't awakened the retail investor, when you see markets going up 400, down 400, up 500, down 500, today down 600, now up, when you see that, that's known as volatility, but more importantly, it's not the average investor that's bringing the market back up. A lot of us have a pretty good consensus. It's the Plunge protection team with the Federal Reserve, and it's being done with really fake money. And so is it something to be concerned about? Absolutely, as a retail investor. And, Rick, I love what you said earlier about the quote of the IMF. They said, think about what they said. If the retail investor catches on, this could get really ugly. This is the whole point here. If the retail investor catches on, this whole thing's over. They're trying, and the reason that's an important statement, they're trying to fool, and they have been trying for a couple years now that everything's okay, the retail investor. But if you just look at the year-to-date ending 2015 cumulative flows by client type in the billions, starting in December of 2014, institutional money flow has been getting out of the market to the point where they really have been getting out, leaving even hedge funds getting out somewhere around March of 2015. The only other people in the market has been the private client. So you notice all the information we're getting next to folks like yourself and those willing to tell the truth has been to keep the private client in the market, to keep it supported. But as the private client state, and that's all mom and pop and all of us, we the people, as we're staying in there, the professionals are getting out. And they're going to leave us holding the firebrand, and that's not smart for we the people. And
Terry, let's recall what's coming up in February. I think the date is February 18, when the New York Stock Exchange is ending. The ability of people to
bet short.
Yeah.
Oh, the stop loss.
Yes, the stop loss. Thank you. My brain was having a stop loss there for a moment.
I remember when you mentioned that before. You said basically they're shut. If everyone's in a movie theater, they're shutting all the doors but one. And if there's a fire, try getting out. Right.
That's right. So that's coming up February 18.
Yes.
And we told people months ago, look, they're clearly telling us, all right, after February 18, if you're still in this thing, you are a sucker. You're a total fool.
It's so difficult, Rick, for folks. A lot of people have such tight relationships with advisors, and advisors are really educated by the systems of the world and the fiat, so they're tied. They have these personal relationships, and I tell people, are they friends enough with you that they're going to cover your losses? Because it's really time to take a look at where you're putting it. And I had a conversation with an advisor the other day. He didn't even understand that gold and silver was the best performing asset class over the last 10 years. He didn't even understand that money and silver for the last 10 years would have been up 300% compared to these market conditions. So a lot of people are confused, and they don't know what to do. And to get out of the market, they're like, well, where do I go? I'm thinking to myself, obviously me, why don't you just go to the constitutional dollar, which is silver, let alone the biblical dollar, which is silver, and park it, because it was always the best place to be anyway. But they just need to feel that confidence of where they go, and that's the deal we're seeing is fear and confusion.
Well, they're not going to get that information if they get their financial information from the Wall Street Journal,
right,
or CNBC, or any of the establishment news organizations, because they maintain an anti-gold, anti-silver propaganda campaign.
Right.
And so you'll never read anything positive about gold and silver in the mainstream news media.
You can't, because it's an antithesis of a fiat created. And some of these people, they may be good people, they may be kind, they may even be a Christian, but they're educated by the system. And they've been leading you down a rabbit hole of deteriorating buying power, where yet those that have been holding silver all these years in their IRAs and retirement accounts have maintained buying power. Even though the price is down, it's still 300% higher than it was in 10 years ago. So they don't understand it, and they're being told by their bosses, because I was an old financial advisor, I know, that here is what you're going to tell your clients. And they won't tell them the truth, because they can't have, as the IMF guy said, they cannot have we the people, retail investor, wake up and pull out. If they did, it is absolute carnage times 10 because of the over-leveraged nature of the market system.
All right, now, Terry, we're recording today's True News. It's currently 3:56 p.m. Eastern Time. Markets will be closing very soon in New York. A few hours ago, the Dow Jones was down over 600 points. I'm looking at Bloomberg News right now, and their top headline is U.S. stocks trim losses in last hour of trading.
Oh, they're already talking about a bear market rebound.
Bear market rebound.
Yeah.
They already had the articles written. They already had the headline written. Tell our audience, Terry, tell our audience who does not understand, when we talk about the Plunge protection team, explain to them what we're referring to.
Well, that really has been around. It's actually the Federal Reserve, let's say the trading desks, and probably collaborative effort of some of the top banks, too. And it's been around really since the Ronald Reagan era. They were there as a backstop that if they ever needed anything, they could just print money out of thin air. They kind of collaborate with the Treasury. They could print money out of thin air and trade it into the market system. I call it the ninth floor trading desk of the Fed. And what they're doing is they're coming in with literally an unlimited supply of money that is actually fake and created out of thin air. And they're buying stocks and bonds in the market to make it or give it the illusion that everything's okay.
Terry, who's actually placing the orders?
The Federal Reserve has an entire floor. I call it the ninth floor. This whole entire trading floor, they have traders. And that a lot of people don't realize that. The Federal Reserve has a whole sophisticated level of traders, just like stock traders at the bank, and they're trading. And you think about it, the Federal Reserve really has nothing. They have all this printed money. There are trillions in the hole, and they have these traders that are employed by them, and their sole goal is to come in and redirect the market to their need.
So the markets are rigged. The markets are skewed. It's really not a free market because the U.S. Federal Reserve is secretly investing unknown amounts of money in the stock market to prop it up.
We know China's already doing that. We know that.
Well, China admits it.
Right. Yeah.
And you got a communist admitting it. That ought to tell you something.
Right. Give credit to the communist Chinese. They come right out and say we're doing it. The U.S. Federal Reserve lies about it. So China, for months, has been propping up its stock market. Every time the Shanghai market plunges, the next day it goes up. And then all the news media organizations write these glowing articles about how the market's rebounded in China and everything's rosy again. And then something else will happen and the Shanghai market will go down again. And then we'll have a couple of days like we had here with New York and London. And then the Federal Reserve comes in and infuses vast amounts of money into the market again, buys up, huge amounts of shares, props up the market. Bloomberg says stocks trim losses in the last hour of trading. It's like, Superman arrived in New York City and saved the day at the last minute.
Well, and Rick, this is exactly what we're getting at is those type of headlines all are designed to fool the retail investor from selling. And, Japan at one point was buying not only all the bonds in the market, they're buying all the stocks. It's the entire Keynesian Western economic system. And this is another day for another conversation. But, if the West actually went on an Austrian economic system, it's almost more biblical than it is Keynesian because it's about saving and production versus deficit debt spending. So it's the whole actual Keynesian economic system that's on trial here, and we're seeing it an utter failure. And so this has been fooling people for quite some time. And the whole idea is to fool the people to keep their hard-earned wealth in the wrong place, which is the banking market system, and away from that of a real tangible asset, which God said in Haggai 2:8, the gold is mine, the silver is mine. And there's a reason why the Shanghai Gold Exchange over there in China just ceased publishing the weekly amount of gold withdrawn from the vault.
That's right. They stopped that. I saw that
That's
article.
very interesting. They know. The Chinese, when they're manipulating the market, they're definitely supporting the markets. But if you've noticed what they're doing to their currency, they're getting rid of their reserves. They know this fiat system is on a path to implosion and retooling, and they're getting rid of the reserves in paper money, yet most of the gold and even silver now for that matter has been shipped to Hong Kong, India, and when it goes to Hong Kong, it's going to mainland China. They've been stocking up and telling their people to buy silver and gold because they know when the fiat system has this reckoning, real tangible assets will be a place for storage of wealth for the beginning of creation of the new system, whatever they do.
Terry, this habit of the central banks rescuing markets, which is totally against the principles of free enterprise.
Yes.
Because they're skewing the markets. They are artificially impacting the markets. So the common average person really doesn't know the true condition of the markets.
And Rick, I've got a quick question. Anytime you bring new money in, that's really just debt. It's not money. It's debt.
That's a great point there because I just did on our television show, I showed some real detailed information on the state of versus real money. Now, if you think about, we only have $1.2 trillion in printed paper form. The rest of it are digits in the cosmos on a computer screen, and it's debt. And half of that 1.2 trillion is in overseas hands, so we're really only recirculating about 600 billion real physical dollars in the United States. The rest of it is fake in the digits in the cosmos. And so there's a very important point there because it's not real value. And yet all of us in America, for the most part, hold on to paper as if it means something. And we just have to go in history to find out that all papers go to zero and then they start over again.
Well, it's like every time a central bank, whether it's in Shanghai, China, or New York City with the U.S. Fed, it's like when they inject money into the markets. You know, one day the market is ready to die, and then it gets this infusion of cash, and the next day it's the corpse is breathing again, and everybody's happy, everybody's elated, and it's like, Terry, this is like, you know, a family at the emergency room of the hospital, and the doctor comes out and says, look, I just gave Grandpa another 3 quarts of blood, and everybody's happy. And then, you know, the doctor comes out 2 hours later and says, I just gave Grandpa another 2 quarts of blood, and everybody's happy. You shouldn't be happy. The old man is bleeding to death.
But the problem is most people today, brokers, bankers, most people's jobs, livelihood, depend on the fiat currency Keynesian economic system. So they're happy because they're getting wealthier. There's a reason the argument is the top 1% gets wealthier, everyone else gets poorer. That is a Keynesian economic model. Austrian economics, everybody benefits. There's just different philosophies, but they're happy because the continued injection of fake money allows them to turn, don't think they're not. The ultra wealthy are taking their fake money, dollars that they're earning in all of this injection, and they're buying hard assets. They're buying boats and land and planes and paintings, diamonds, gold, silver. It's tangible. So that way when the system collapses or reorganizes, they're holding on to real tangible value. So it's not that they're all sitting in paper money. They're happy because they're able to convert that to real tangible goods.
Instead of annuities.
Unfortunately, annuities had their place in history, but I am so concerned for how many people that parked in annuities and will be utterly just annihilated with the inflation, even though we're in deflation, with the inflation, meaning buying power, that thing is giving them going forward. They think they're making money, but they'll have the same amount over a 10-year period, and yet their buying power is substantially decreasing. This is not the time in history to look at it and say it's just a recession, it'll get back to normal. We're a very normalcy bias-driven society, and we better understand the real definition of money is getting ready to change real quick. And the pricing mechanism that controls constitutional money, which was grains of silver according to Article 1, Section 8, they don't understand that the pricing mechanism in the COMEX is the futures market. That futures market is so manipulated by naked short paper trades that if just 10% of those future contracts stood for physical delivery, if they actually demanded the physical delivery of silver, just 10% of them, then the whole entire COMEX would default because they don't have the physical for the delivery of what they're selling.
And Terry, we've discussed this in the past. That is criminal behavior.
I would agree.
That is criminal
behavior. But it's a survival,
behavior.
Rick. It's like war. It's a financial war to the nth degree. And it was an expansion of just, party time materialism, but that's Keynesian, of course. And we've lost the value of hard work and savings and production. I was born and raised in Detroit. We produced. That was an Austrian philosophy in economics. And I think if we ever do have a major reorganizing and collapse in our country. That I hope anyway, there'd be some highly intelligent people making the argument to switch the entire economic model, because that drove the thinking patterns. And now we have, as you said, virtually all of it is some form of a criminal or fraudulent form of activity for us if we did it, but of course not them, because it's feeding the trough at the top of the food chain.
Yeah, Terry, Bob and Doc and I were in St. Kitts last week, and Jim and Lori Baker were with us. And Jim Baker went to prison. He served 5 years in a federal prison, 5 years out of a 45-year sentence. And he at dinner told us things that he does not share with the general public about that experience. But Terry, what the feds prosecuted him on and convicted him on and sent him to the clinker was this, that he was receiving donations through the mail in which he was promising that the donor could spend some time at the hotel he built with the donations. And the federal government said, well, that's a timeshare agreement, and you have sold more timeshares than you can physically accommodate, even though Jim's ministry never used the term timeshare, and even though not one donor ever was kept out of the hotel. There was no record of anything like that happening. But because the donations went through the U.S. Postal Service, they convicted him of
wire fraud.
Mail fraud.
Oh, my.
Okay? They gave him a 45-year sentence. He spent 5 hard years in a federal prison for the, quote, crime of selling more timeshares than he could physically deliver if everybody asked to be at the hotel at the same time. Now, you just told me that if everybody who wants their gold and silver at the COMEX showed up, 90% would be turned away empty-handed.
Oh, absolutely.
Then why aren't they in prison?
They have the guns. They're the enforcer. I always tell people that. I asked a lawyer
So
one
they're
time,
legalized thieves.
Well, right, and our founding fathers actually, warned us of this, and they said this was coming if we don't use the Constitution to keep it, let's say, contained. But my biggest concern is this has been going on now since we came off the gold standard in the 70s. And we just really have kind of run it out. This just so happens to be a very epic period in history where I believe that those of us alive today are going to see something we've never seen before and probably will never see again. And it's going to be an enormous shift, global realignment, whether it be a currency reset, new currencies created. Something has to give. And that's why being where we are currently, status quo, stocks, bonds, sitting in cash in a bank that can just take your money now with bail-ins, we have to really rethink this and be properly diversified in physical assets. You could roll over IRAs into physical silver. I mean, silver goes back to the high. It's a 200% return from here. So it's a nice place to be with a real asset that can be handed down to your family. They don't want you knowing that, because in Keynesian economics, they need the money to keep circulating over and over again in order to create the illusion that there's value.
Hey, for the record,
there's no value to be had.
For the record, Wall Street just closed. It's down 249.28, and Bloomberg is cheering the late-day rally. I'm pointing this out because I want our audience.
We only lost $250 instead of $500.
Right. Yeah, you guys were losing $600 earlier. Now you only lost $249. But I'm pointing this out because I want our audience to see the deception that's in the news media every day.
Yes.
They're pros at lying to you.
That's not good. And what we have to, and that's why I think you have such a strong audience, Rick, is you're helping people see truth. And it all, once you over and over and you show it over and over, people can see that the system is stacked. You have corporation, media, government, all, I call it an elitist system at the top. And feudalism is what you can get into, and then you bring it down to we the people. And it's just like, you were talking in the beginning, you were mentioning oil and energy. What's fascinating about all of this energy, number one, it's not good with low prices. We all know that. It's going to collapse economies. It's going to cause a lot of Middle Eastern nations to probably get desperate because they won't have any money and they'll have to do something to try to shake it up. But what's interesting about our banks, Wells Fargo, for instance, they have an exposure of like $17 billion in junk energy. But that's not the real issue. Citigroup, they say, has about $58 billion in exposure. But what's interesting about that, so they lose $17 billion in this energy drop, exposure to companies and so forth. The thing for me that's more important is the bigger concern is the largest U.S. mortgage lender. Wells Fargo is the largest mortgage lender. And what is going on with the mortgage book? They only had $64 billion in mortgage applications for the quarter. That was not only a major drop from quarter three, but also the lowest since the first quarter of 2014, where they had some $210 billion. Meaning it's just coming to a grinding halt. That's in the mortgage industry now. And so it's not just oil, it's not just the mortgage, it's all coming together. And if every sector starts coming into this kind of negative protracting number, we're not looking at a recession. We're looking at depression.
That's a two-thirds
and massive default. Because think of 2008. Right. We're now six, if not more with swap lines, we're $6 trillion deeper in the hole than we were in 2008.
Hey, Doc, just before we started the program, Doc gave me a piece of information called in from a True News listener. And what was that information, Doc?
I had a True News listener that called us, and he was just confirming the rail traffic story because he deals with that as, I don't know, can I tell the company that
sure.
he works at? He works for FedEx, and so one of his jobs is to deal with the rail traffic that comes in for shipping. Well, they just informed employees there's some massive layoffs ahead because that shipping traffic is down for rail. And so that's going to affect FedEx in laying off jobs. And so there's probably going to be a big announcement here pretty soon. There's going to be a big contraction at FedEx as far as shipping is concerned.
And how many jobs did he hear is going to be eliminated at FedEx?
Up to 4,000. So that's, and so if you tie that with the shipping traffic that we've been hearing about, and Terry and I were talking off air about that before we came on, and then the rail traffic in the U.S., and so you got that cascade effect that's rippling through the economy. So it's definitely happening there, and I think we're just seeing the first fruits of that in the market. But the real story is going to be several months from now as this catches up. And so,
Terry, many of us were warning throughout 2015 that there would be a shift in the world, not only in the markets, but in the geopolitical realm by the end of September. And of course, because so many Christians are very short-sighted, they're looking for the big event, the single event. And so when September came and went, and the Shemitah cycle was over, and the blood moons had happened, and the world didn't come to an end, they said, "Oh, these guys don't know what they're talking about."
Right.
But something did shift. There was the pivot. That's what I kept telling people. Watch for the pivot. The day after the Shemitah cycle ended is when Russia started bombing Syria. Mm-hmm. And in October, the markets turned south. The economy started locking up. And so now we're into late January, and as Doc is talking about that cascading effect, we see this ripple effect. The dominoes are falling, which means by April and May of 2016, we're going to see the next wave.
Right.
And you have think about it, that next wave in April, That's already after they've closed the door for stop losses.
That's right.
That pivot's real, Rick. You're not kidding when you say pivot. It pivoted in September. They had almost a $500 billion derivative blip that would have crashed the market system, but the plunge protection stepped in to turn that around. I mean, I even saw the chart data on that. It just went straight back up. It happened. And so you have that and the cascading effect. You're seeing tanker rates, as Doc was saying, in trucking. What we need to know, these are just data points that say, oh, okay, we're going into recession or economy slowing down. That would be the average or the media spin. But what they're not telling you is the underlying derivatives attached to all of this activity that will not only, if it's not handled right, it will implode upon those that are in the wrong place with their assets, because we're talking 2008 on steroids.
Hey, listen to this story from ZeroHedge.com. China's slowing growth has crushed shipping rates to such an extent that hiring an 1,100-foot merchant vessel would set you back less than the price of renting a Ferrari for a day. So you can rent an entire barge for a day, cheaper than you can rent a Ferrari.
Well, it's gotten so bad that you can get 2 gallons of milk or 2 gallons of crude for 1 gallon of milk now by the price that has been indexed.
Right. So it's a 2-to-1 margin there for every 1 gallon of milk, 2 gallons of crude. And
then all those derivatives attached to that.
Right. All the bets that have been made against that.
So we pay $1.99 for a 16-ounce bottle of water.
Even by the gallon, Rick, water now is about $60 a gallon. I mean, $60 a barrel, just water.
Right. And somewhere I read today that the Kurds are producing oil at $1 to $2 a barrel.
Yeah, Edward was sharing that story with us earlier.
That's right. Well, are we being told that eventually oil's going to go down to $2 a barrel?
I mean, if the Kurds are
barrel's
producing,
worth more.
The barrel is worth more than the oil.
If the Kurds are producing and Iran is producing, that puts countries like, Saudi Arabia, Russia, all these other big oil-producing nations in a real world of hurt, doesn't it?
It sure does. And Terry,
well, and what's scary about that, Doc, is we all know how it goes. When you start running out of money, you get desperate, and criminal activity becomes where. What will they do? Will they try to stoke a war? Will they get desperate in that way? There's something ready to unleash, and I know you've been trying to say it, and I try to say it on our television program. Please heed the warning, because even over in Europe, where they're not only having a massive immigration influx, which I believe is to destroy their cultures and beyond, you now have reports of Italian banks collapsing. And then you start looking at the bigger picture. The Italian debt system's well over $1 trillion. And many people remember Greece. But, Greece was never the main story here. This is something to pay attention to.
Well, Terry, what about the highest ranking general of the Swiss Army several weeks ago told the entire nation, buy a gun and get ready?
Get ready, because I think the whole European system is in jeopardy, because Greece, like I said, wasn't the main issue. It was really something smaller of what was really coming. And the Eurozone's bigger problem and the weak economies that are happening there, along with all of this immigration, Italy, Spain, and Portugal will soon need, let's just say a Greek-style bailout. But here's the problem. And when the headlines just came out that the Italian banks are collapsing, we do know this. All of those, Italy, Spain, Portugal, are in need of a style of a bailout like Greece. But the problem is
they're not going to be bailouts. They're going to be bail-ins.
Well, they have to be, because there is not enough money available anywhere to bail out the economies of that size sufficiently enough to allow them to remain as a common currency union. So we're talking about such a big event. And if you think that's just Europe, don't worry about it. Remember, they're all tied together. European banks are tied into the American banks. the whole Western system's tied together. So if they're actually reporting the Italian banks nearing collapse, and they're really getting serious about all these countries needing a bailout, and there's no money to bail out, you better believe bail-in number one, and two, major crisis coming, which that sees, to me, a.k.a. duck and cover and get protected.
Terry, I'm still trying to comprehend the stunning warning that came from Klaus Schwab, the founder and president of the World Economic Forum that's meeting this week in Davos, Switzerland. At the beginning of the forum, he said there could be 1 billion refugees coming out of Africa and the southern hemisphere into the northern hemisphere. 1 billion. I mean, I can't even comprehend that amount of mass migration in the world. No wonder the Swiss Army general said, get a gun.
Yeah.
They know this is coming. They know the system is breaking apart and that the governments are going to collapse. They're going to be unable to hold it together.
Right. Right. And that's the concern. And if all of your assets, which really are designed, our assets are all of our hard-earned wealth is all tied up in a bank or in a building or in a brokerage. If it really hits hard enough, if that kind of chaos comes into play, they're just going to lock the door, turn off the power. You're not getting your assets. So it's really important to understand that proper diversity to tangible assets, because if it even gets close to that, which we see it coming anyway, it's not something we're talking about. It's happening right now, the immigration, and then we're talking about the banking system in Europe. You can see through it. And, it's interesting, the word apocalypse. We always think apocalypse, it's the end of everything, it's a total annihilation, the world ending. Apocalypse, really definition, is an unveiling
of Jesus Christ.
And think of the world system being ran by Lucifer, all the lies and deception, and then the unveilings to see the truth. And that's why I always contend for those that are on fire in God and the Holy Spirit. He shows you. I know he's showing you, Rick. That's why you talk so passionately about your subject matter. Showing us behind the veil what is coming. If he's telling us what's coming, if we're looking behind the veil, all of these data points connecting the dots to it, shouldn't we reasonably in the kingdom here get serious about protecting our assets, preparing our family for food, and getting ready to just, keep it simple?
The devil makes his living doing 3 things. He steals, he kills, he destroys.
Yes.
That's a full day for him. He goes home at the end of the day, and he is proud that he stole, killed, and destroyed. That's all he's about. And so his system, his world system, it's the world system that's breaking up. It's not God's system that's breaking up. It's the world system that's breaking up because it's built on lies, deception, thievery, unjust measures and weights.
Yes.
Jesus said he came to give life and give life abundantly.
Yes.
So, and just a complete antithesis to what the devil does. Where the devil kills, Jesus brings life. Where the devil steals, Jesus gives. And so it's just the complete antithesis to what Satan does. And so our trust has to be in him and him alone.
And James tells us what the scene's going to look like at the very end. In the 5th chapter of James, he said, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have heaped up treasure in the last days. Indeed, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out, and the cries of the reapers have reached the ears of the Lord. You have lived on earth in pleasure and luxury. You have fattened your hearts as in the day of slaughter. You have condemned. You have murdered the just. He does not resist you. Therefore, be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, waiting patiently for it until it receives the early and the latter rain. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. You know, Terry, there's a reason people are going to crawl into caves and crawl under rocks when the Lord comes back, because he's looking for George Soros.
I hope so.
He's looking for the Rockefellers. He's coming back. He's coming. The Lord is coming back, and he is going to dish out justice for the thievery, the robbery, the misery, the wars, all of the pain that these people have inflicted upon humanity. Because this economic collapse is going to be beyond the comprehension of anybody, what is taking place right now. And the suffering is going to be great. And it's happening because of their thievery and deception and lying.
Rick, you know, what you just said is so important. I can't even, the connection here, that part of James, you are so right on with that, because when it says the gold and silver in corrupt or corrode, remember, gold and silver was money. It's your money that's going to corrode. The whole rich in the system today is paper fiat. That's what's going to corrode. But what's so beautiful about that scripture goes right with Job, one of the oldest books in the Bible, Job 27:16, 17. The rich will pile up silver like dust, because silver was money. And the end of the scripture says, but in the end it'll be distributed to the innocent, we the Christian. Because the rich have abandoned God and God's system and God's way of money, silver. They're now all holding all of these derivative fake paper investments. And in the end, it says it'll be distributed to the innocent, because I believe if we in the kingdom stay faithful to Jesus Christ and the Word, keep our money into real money, number one, constitutional money, which is grains of silver, and we're holding that real silver, when this thing hits, it's distributed to the innocent, as in Job, and it goes right along with that, because what James was saying, gold and silver corrode, is because they're holding paper wealth now, not the real wealth. And so when the paper collapses, the silver, of course, will rise in value, and that's the kind of like a little, I think, a biblical secret of wealth protection.
Hey, Terry, for people who have been listening to True News for a length of time, if they are still invested heavily in the stock market, I really don't know what to say, because I've done everything I can possibly do to tell them what's going to happen. But for those who are still in the stock market, or maybe they've just discovered us in recent days or weeks, and the Lord is waking them up at the last minute, do they have time to get their investment money out of the stock market? Do they have time to get their retirement funds? Because when this thing goes down, the 401ks, the IRAs, they're all going to vanish. They're going to vaporize.
Yeah.
And you're going to have people in their late 50s and early 60s who are on the verge of retiring, and within days, it's all going to disappear.
That's right.
Right.
And they're going to be working until their death to get food. So for people who are still in that system, do they have time to get, I mean, the way the markets are going right now, I mean, this thing, all the wheels could come off the bus any day. I don't know how many.
It's already coming off.
Yeah, the wheels are coming off.
Doing a good job of carrying it along.
Right. The wheels are already coming off. But when I say, well, you know, all the wheels coming off, at this point, can people still move their retirement funds out of the system? and get it over into silver or precious metals?
Well, the supply's still there. It's getting tighter, absolutely, but you can. I mean, they're battling the advisors. A lot of them are in these mutual funds and the advisors. Advisors still to this day will make you feel insane if you think of silver, even though it's the best performing asset in the last 10 years. But they're really fighting that leaving the market concept. The market's down almost 20%. So they better get the idea that you're right. It's not one wheel falling off. It's just about all of them getting ready. All they have to do is call whoever's managing their money, whatever broker or system's managing it, and say, go to cash and everything. Sell everything across the board and go to cash just to protect from further decline.
The fastest thing to do is to tell your retirement fund broker, move everything out of the stock market and put it into cash.
And you remember, at the beginning of the program, that's exactly what the IMF people said they don't want to see. But all due respect, I'm not here for the protection of the IMF people or the bankers. I care about we, the people. I care about our neighbors and our friends and the children and the grandchildren that are attached to all of this. This is our money, our wealth that God entrusted to us. So the IMF said that's exactly what they said not to do. But that's exactly what they should be doing. Go into cash across the board. Then once it's in cash, whatever is on their heart, they could easily roll over to a silver precious metals IRA and put physical silver in there so they won't even have to think about it. They can go to bed knowing they're just sitting on a pile of physical silver, let all this play out, and then when it's all done, they can sell off portions and rediversify.
Okay, for people that want to do that, what do they do? What's the first step? How do they contact you?
Well, they can give us a call, of course, at our office here. We can give the phone number out there, 888-747-3309. They can always go to our website, register for information, and we have a tremendously educated staff all on fire for God that can answer questions. And they can go to cornerstoneassetmetals.com, and they can register right there for information, and we'll contact them. But by calling us or registering for information, we'll be able to find out what their situation is and guide them through this. We're here to serve, and we are the manufacturers of the only good delivery Judeo-Christian silver in the country, hallmarked. And so we provide that for the IRAs. But more importantly, it's just to get educated, and we're here to help do that. So give us a call, register on our website, and we'll guide you through the process.
Terry, when you said you're the only manufacturer of Judeo-Christian silver coins, tell our audience what you're talking about. I know, I've seen it. You've given me some. But take a moment to describe it.
God has just been so wonderful and blessed us with relationships. We are in the refinery, and we're custom minters, and we have the hallmarking because of the refining relationships and the relationships we have. We get our silver manufactured, refined, and hallmarked and minted by a LBMA COMEX certified, good delivery certified refinery. Now, what that means is our silver has the same level of purity and quality as not only American Silver Eagle, but because it's good delivery, it technically can be used in a bank settlement transaction. Of course, they're not going to want to use that because Judeo-Christian. But then the coin itself is so beautiful, and it has scriptures on it. It has 12 stars on both sides for the tribes, and then 12 for the disciples. It has a lion for we know who, and a crown for our king. And it is so religiously overtoned Judeo-Christian that I really believe it even gives us a First Amendment protection against for freedom of religion. So in case there is some weird confiscation attempt towards precious metal, you never have to give up your cross or your jewelry, and silver that is so religiously done, Judeo-Christian, we can say no. That's our First Amendment protected right.
Well, Terry, I'm sure you know in 1933, Franklin Roosevelt's order to confiscate gold excluded religious coins and artifacts.
Yes, that's
Gold
right.
and silver that were for religious purposes were excluded from Roosevelt's confiscation order.
And that's what ours is. And because it's the only one out there hallmarked, in the hallmark with a stamp of approval that gives it good delivery, bank transaction quality, I mean, what a blessing that we've been able to find and put into these relationships. And I know God did that for its purpose. You know, when he said build it, I'll fill it, I understand why.
Mm-hmm.
And
So,
it's here to get the kingdom protected in his asset.
now, for our listeners, if you have your retirement funds invested in the stock market, the smartest, fastest thing for you to do to avert massive losses is tomorrow, first thing in the morning, call your broker and order him or her to move your funds out of the stock market and park it in cash. Don't listen to your broker trying to persuade you against it. Put your foot down. Say, it's my money. This is what I want done. Move it into cash. That way you will avert future losses. You've already lost about 20% in the last couple of weeks by not doing this. I assure you, you're going to lose another 40 to 50% in the months to come. And then once you get it into cash, then call Terry Sacka. His number is 888-747-3309. Or go to his website, cornerstoneassetmetals.com. Tell him you want some help setting up your retirement fund in silver. He'll take it from there and guide you through the process. I want to close the program by reading from Psalm 93. The Lord reigns. He is clothed with majesty. The Lord is clothed. He has girded himself with strength. Surely the world is established so that it cannot be moved. Your throne is established from of old. You are from everlasting. Let's give our God, the Lord God Jehovah, the God of Israel. Let's give him praise and glory and honor. Don't let the world tell you to shut up, to be quiet. No, instead, open your mouth and praise the Lord. Let everything that hath breath praise the Lord. And praise the Lord. Let everything that hath breath praise the Lord.
And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Here is end-time newsman Rick Wiles.
This is True News, 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. Retirement investment strategist Terry Sacka is standing by to join the program in a few minutes. The big story today is the continuing carnage rocking stock markets around the world. Shanghai, Tokyo, London, Frankfurt, Zurich, New York City. The story is the same. Shares plunged in value as fears of a global depression escalated and the price of oil continued to search for the bottom. London's FTSE officially entered a bear market, meaning it has fallen more than 20% from its market top in 2015. U.S. oil had its worst day since 2003. West Texas Intermediate oil prices settled at $26.55 a barrel. Brent futures ended the day at $27.87. Today's low prices are getting precariously closer to the psychologically important level of $25 per barrel. Some of America's biggest banks have warned in recent weeks that there will be substantial. Terry, it's been a wild day. Asia, last night I was up early in the morning, in the wee hours of the morning, and checked the markets. Realized they were going south very fast. Likewise, Europe started out the same way. New York City, the New York Stock Exchange, at one time the Dow Jones was down over 600 points. Now, as we are recording this program, just minutes before the closing bell, something miraculous has happened, Terry. What happened?
Yeah. Miraculous is about right. We've seen so much volatility. If it hasn't awakened the retail investor, when you see markets going up 400, down 400, up 500, down 500, today down 600, now up, when you see that, that's known as volatility, but more importantly, it's not the average investor that's bringing the market back up. A lot of us have a pretty good consensus. It's the Plunge protection team with the Federal Reserve, and it's being done with really fake money. And so is it something to be concerned about? Absolutely, as a retail investor. And, Rick, I love what you said earlier about the quote of the IMF. They said, think about what they said. If the retail investor catches on, this could get really ugly. This is the whole point here. If the retail investor catches on, this whole thing's over. They're trying, and the reason that's an important statement, they're trying to fool, and they have been trying for a couple years now that everything's okay, the retail investor. But if you just look at the year-to-date ending 2015 cumulative flows by client type in the billions, starting in December of 2014, institutional money flow has been getting out of the market to the point where they
bankruptcies in U.S. energy companies if oil stays at $25 per barrel for a long time or dips lower. Despite the global glut of petroleum, oil-producing nations continue to increase their output. Storage space is becoming scarce to hold the excess oil. Ambrose Evans-Pritchard, international financial editor for London's Telegraph, wrote today from Davos, Switzerland, as he attends the World Economic Forum. He said, quote, "The International Monetary Fund is increasingly alarmed by signs that market liquidity is drying up and may trigger an even more violent global sell-off if investors rush for the exits at the same time." Zhu Min, the IMF's deputy director, said the stock market rout of the last 3 weeks is just a foretaste of what may happen as the U.S. Federal Reserve continues to raise interest rates this year, pushing up borrowing costs across the world. He warned that investors and wealth funds have clustered together in crowded positions. Asset markets have become dangerously correlated, amplifying the effects of any shift in mood. He's quoting Mr. Min from the IMF. The key issue is that liquidity could drop dramatically, and that scares everyone. Zhu told a panel at the World Economic Forum, quote, "If everybody is moving together, we don't have any liquidity at all. We have to be ready to act very fast," end of quote. Harvard professor Kenneth Rogoff said the fear in the market stems from the dawning realization that the Chinese are not magicians, and that this time the U.S. Fed may stand back and let the bloodletting run its course. Rogoff, speaking on Fox Business.
They really have been getting out, leaving even hedge funds getting out somewhere around March of 2015. The only other people in the market has been the private client. So you notice all the information we're getting next to, folks like yourself and those willing to tell the truth, has been to keep the private client in the market to keep it supported. But as the private client stated, and that's all mom and pop and all of us, we the people, as we're staying in there, the professionals are getting out. And they're going to leave us holding the firebrand, and that's not smart for we the people.
And Terry, let's recall what's coming up in February. I think the date is February 18, when the New York Stock Exchange is ending. The ability of people to
bet short.
Yeah.
Oh, the stop loss.
Yes, the stop loss. Thank you. My brain was having a stop loss there for a moment.
I remember when you mentioned that before. You said basically they're shut. If everyone's in a movie theater, they're shutting all the doors but one. And if there's a fire, try getting out. Right.
That's right. So that's coming up February 18.
Yes.
And we told people months ago, look, they're clearly telling us, all right, after February 18, if you're still in this thing, you are a sucker. You're a total fool.
It's so difficult, Rick, for folks. A lot of people have such tight relationships with advisors, and advisors are really educated by the systems of the world and the fiat, so they're tied. They have these personal relationships, and I tell people, are they friends enough with you that they're going to cover your losses? Because it's really time to take a look at where you're putting it. And I had a conversation with an advisor the other day. He didn't even understand that gold and silver was the best performing asset class over the last 10 years. He didn't even understand that money and silver for the last 10 years would have been up 300% compared to...
This news said what is driving this is that the central banks are not coming to the rescue. Professor Rogoff said these deep anxieties are causing companies to hold back investment, entrenching a slow growth malaise. The Fed may be forced to halt its tightening cycle and even cut rates again if the wild sell-off continues for much longer. Again, I'm reading from the Telegraph, this article written today by Ambrose Evans Pritchard. Paul Singer, head of Elliott Management, said central banks around the world have corrupted global asset markets with $15 trillion of bond and equity purchases over the last 7 years, creating a total dependency on monetary policies that must inevitably be all the more painful when it ends. The bond markets, supposedly safe, have become the epicenter of risk. Mr. Singer said things could be very disorderly. There is the potential for a tectonic shift if investors lose confidence in central banks. End of quote. In an interview with the New York Review of Books, billionaire financier George Soros warned that the European Union is on the verge of collapse over the migrant crisis and is in danger of kicking the ball further up the hill in its management of the issue, which has seen more than 1 million refugees arrive in Europe in 2015. But Doc Burkhart, Bob Bierman, Edward Zoll are here in the studio. Gentlemen, glad to have you back here today.
Good to be back, Rick.
Good to be here.
Glad to be here.
Yes, sir. And retirement investment strategist Terry Sacka is on the telephone. Terry is the chief strategist for Cornerstone Asset Metals. Terry, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Rick.